second attached restaurant to the one we had built. So I'm actually sitting in it now. So it's side yard barbecue. And we've got a couple big Texas smokers back there. This horse trailer we converted into a full bar, 2 wells. But it's just a really nice outdoor space. And we did that in response to COVID. And we actually grand opened when we were first going in that first round, we were going into purple tier. We did close down this new stay-at-home orders, and we did open up this last weekend. So this last Saturday and Sunday were our first 2 days open. At this point, we're only going to be open on the weekends because the amount of time, energy, and effort it takes to open and close with bars and restaurants, with food and training and staff. And it's funny how the state just kind of turns it on and turns it off with no real warning. It's really painful to do. So just to not be, Charlie Brown kicking the football and getting it swiped out, we're just doing weekends and then focusing on the spirits during the week. And we're distributing, or we're talking with distributors to get out of San Diego. We are doing direct to consumer in 7 states, and so far so good on the online stuff. So it's been painful. I'm not going to say that these new businesses are thriving, but it definitely helps keep the team's spirits up, and there's something to do, which I feel bad for a lot of other places that don't have that opportunity, especially places that can't open up because they just don't have outdoor dining. But it's been a learning curve. But my hope is that this business has so many layers that can survive in whatever weather. If we're manufacturing and distributing that, and direct to consumer, that'll survive during lockdowns. And when we're open back up, we've built something special here. So it'll be interesting when everybody gets to see it.
Thank you, and thanks for the preview. That looks fantastic, and hopefully, if anything,
11 to 6.
Go down there.
Yeah, 11 to 6 Saturday and Sunday. If you missed this last week, and come down here. It's best barbecue in San Diego.
Great. Ingo, Cox is on the other end of that spectrum. Your product, internet connectivity, has just never been more in demand and more at the forefront. You were definitely not going to be facing a closure. But as people were transitioning to work and school via their home, things got probably a little crazy. Cox has a huge employee presence, so many of whom had to embrace those changes on the fly. You can't plan for this sort of internal cultural change. You couldn't have planned for this sort of experience. How do you address company culture to embrace entrepreneurial thinking? And what were some of the takeaways from those learning moments?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. That was our biggest predicament, is just at the time when our customers were needing our services the most. There was so much unknown about the virus in the early days, and we weren't entering homes for the safety of our employees. So one of the things that we were challenged with is, how do you manage a customer technology that they're using, and at the same time kind of come up with new and innovative ways to be able to serve customers. And right when Gavin Newsom originally made the announcement that we were shutting down, within 5 minutes, I had received some calls from some of our senior leadership in our Atlanta office, and we're a large company. So when you go to launch something, there is a process to go through that launch that involves finance and project management. We really love our Gantt charts and all the things, the gates that go with launching a new product. And what I found interesting was our leadership basically came to us and said, hey, look, everything's changed. We want you to go out there and figure out the best way to do this, and tell us what you need from us and support. And so early on in the process, we got together with our teams and our supervisors and our frontline technicians and said, hey, here's a predicament. We need to go figure out how to service our customers in this environment where you can't go inside a home. And so early on, you saw the technicians would use FaceTime to talk with their customers. They were climbing up on ladders, peering through windows, trying to walk customers through on how to hook things up. And as we brought that information back to our Atlanta office, they in turn said, hey, have you ever thought about augmented virtual reality? Maybe there's something, would you guys be interested in doing that? And we in turn, within about 3 weeks, which would be a record for us to launch a product or a service or a tool that we have, we had launched a application called Help Lightning, and it basically allows the technician and the customer to basically use their phones and interact, and the technician can point things out on the phone. The customers can see it, so as they're walking them through on how to hook up or check settings, you have that ability to kind of interact with the customer in a real time, and they can visually see what you're pointing at, which, you know, what really, we kind of went from a very large, you know, organization that moves slow with new products down to basically telling, you know, more entrepreneur, which is basically go out there, you guys go figure this out, bring back what works, get rid of what doesn't work, and, you know, we'll keep making our adjustments on the fly. And literally that whole process took about 3 weeks to get that application up and running. Again, you know, it's, for us, it was impressive, and it was a big benefit for customers that were very frustrated with, you know, the technology at the time and the dependence on the technology. You know, there was no, well, I'll just go work from the office, right? You had to do it. So we had to find solutions for it. So what was interesting is we also sat down with our technicians and said, hey, what's working and what doesn't work on this? And out of that, we've identified 40 different use cases that we can potentially do, and we're currently developing 15 of those. So, you know, initially out the gate, it was about just doing the immediate needs. Now we're looking at using some of this technology to enhance the customer's experience going forward, as well as the technician's experience on helping each other. So it moved quick, and I hats off to our leadership for, you know, stepping back and saying, you guys have to solve this. We have to take a different role within the company. We're going to trust you to lead us down the path that you need to. And it worked. So that's kind of one of our big successes out the gate on how we were to keep driving and keep helping our customers, and what, you know, everyone, I think, really admits is a unprecedented challenge for any business.
That is so true and so interesting. How folks are empowering their teams to come up with solutions. And we're going to kind of get into that too in a little bit. Colleen, though, let's talk about FASS. And you were in the early stages of moving your location from Hillcrest to Coronado. Great business to go visit, by the way, when the pandemic struck. So what would have been a logistical challenge normally became exponentially harder with closure orders. As a franchisee, you had some support, but were mostly on your own, it sounds like. What were the most impactful things that you were able to do during this process?
For us, being part of a franchise has its good and its bad. And the good is that you do get a lot of support in certain ways. The bad is you have a lot of rules you have to follow. And one of the things with us is we had a corporate website that was set up for us that we couldn't change very much, and we couldn't sell anything on it. So that's kind of just something that we all kind of lived with, you know, the whole time that we've all the franchisees, we've all always felt the same thing about it, but knew it was an uphill battle to try to get that changed. But right before the pandemic, my husband and I decided that we were just going to make a website anyway. Just something on the side, just kind of see how it goes, see if there's any use for it. And then when the pandemic happened, it was the most useful thing that we had by far, because I could immediately speak to my customers, tell them what was going on. We were changing our hours on a daily basis. I had lost all my staff. So, you know, one day I'd say we're going to be open for 2 hours a day for curbside pickup. Or no, now we have to close. So it was just such an up and down, and I know it was for a lot of other people. So having that website and being able to do curbside pickup and people order things for delivery, it saved us. And business was still really, really bad, but it would have been a lot worse without that. So it was something that, and since then, a group of us have gone to our franchisor and we've demanded a website. So we actually have a different website now. But if it weren't for the pandemic, I don't think any of us would have pushed that hard for it. So I think, like, for us, it was looking at something that we had been thinking about doing anyway, that I was glad was already in the works. So we were able to, you know, to capitalize off that a little bit. Because it's hard. Our store is what we call an experience store. So when you come in, you taste oils and vinegars and whiskeys and brandies. We were doing a lot of events. We were doing whiskey classes, salad dressing workshops, private parties, charity events. So we were really, really running off of those things. So the pandemic, as you can imagine, is not very friendly to any of that, you know, as far as the tasting goes and having groups in. So we've had to, you know, change with that a little bit too. We do a lot more pre-bottling, and we've gone back and forth on our business model. So the good thing for us was, because we were planning on moving anyway, I knew I would have about 4 to 5 months in between stores. So that got me through a little of the pandemic without having the stress of it. But that's about all we accounted for. We've ended up being closed for almost 9 months now because of construction and, you know, delays in getting open. So that was hard. And plus we had to, you know, when we moved, we wanted to liquidate as much inventory as we possibly could. And it's hard when you don't have people coming into the store. So the website, again, was a huge help for that. So that's kind of where the good news is we're getting ready to open in less than 2 weeks. So we're really, really close. We're really happy about the new location. The new location is much larger. So we're already kind of jumping into a new business model with it. So there's some unknown with that. The plan was to be a wine bar on one side of it. So we're going to have to kind of make some adjustments there too, and do more things to go. We're going to try to do some online events with our whiskey tastings and things like that. But so there's still some unknown territory for us when we get open.
Oh, definitely. And I think I know for certain that Dennis can sympathize with the challenges of a physical space and opening and going through all of that. That was hard before COVID. And I think we're finding now that everything that was challenging before is just, you know, the sprinkles on top hard now, right?
It really is. And it's, you know, things just take a little bit longer. And yeah, there are a lot of things that weren't easy before COVID. And that's one of them. And trying to get into a new space and deal with all of those kind of things. Like right now, I'm still working on my liquor license transfers. And, you know, my ABC lady, her last day was 2 days ago. I had no idea. So, you know, so there's always something, but it's, you know, we'll get there. We'll definitely get there.
Yeah. And so you had mentioned your website, and transitioning to the online sale component is so key. It was such a critical thing that many people did. Is there anything particular that you learned about setting up that website that you would share with others? And then after you shared, Dennis, do you want to weigh in on it and how you leverage the online stuff too? So Colleen, go ahead. You go first.
Yeah. So the first thing with it was that it wasn't perfect when we got it up. It didn't look exactly the way I wanted it to. And if it weren't for COVID and needing it up so quickly, I probably would have just kept waiting and trying to get the perfect pictures in and you know, doing trying to make it perfect. But it did what it needed to do, and it was functional. So it got the information out and people could order. And that's kind of all I needed. So I think it's really important to not do something just because you're trying to make it perfect. So that was the big thing. And then we were able to then later transition to another website. But it's, you know, it was a lot easier than I thought it was going to be once we got it up. It was not as daunting as a task as it seemed to be. So.
Yeah, Dennis, you want to share?
Yeah, I learned Shopify on Christmas Day. It's kind of interesting. Spent my holidays learning the online shop, if you will. Shopify, I think, is amazing. If I was going to tell anybody starting an online business, Shopify with all their apps, everything's really integrated. It's really nice. We also changed our POS platform to Toast, and Toast also has a really dynamic email and text grab functionality for retargeting and even like tracking your top spenders. So there's a lot of that online sales integration, which was pretty new to me. I mean, we've done some direct to consumer with Thorn, but creating a really solid online store was cool to see what they have available now. So a lot of the tough stuff, the retargeting and marketing stuff that used to almost have to have as a secondary part, to your business is now able to all integrate and be online, which is pretty neat.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
I agree with you about Shopify. That's what we're using right now. And it's nice because it integrates also with our email marketing. So anything that you can get to connect together like that is really helpful.
Definitely. And Shopify should have probably sponsored this now that I'm hearing you.
I think so.
But yeah, those tools are, it's such a tough thing. And I think a lot of folks wouldn't have made the leap if it weren't for the pressure that the pandemic put on us, and what would have been a put it off, we're finally just jumping in and making things happen, which is maybe one minor positive. But Ingo, I think your teams probably have some pretty incredible stories about how your customer interface is changing. Businesses like FASS and Thorn Street, the internet just can't go down. That's their lifeline now. So how are you all handling that component?
Yeah, there's definitely a certain intensity that has come with the pandemic is around internet services. And, what I will say is I think Colleen hit on it, which is, I think customers' willingness to try new things and their expectations has changed significantly. And if the pandemic wouldn't have been here, I don't know if a lot of the businesses and the solutions that we're coming up with would have been able to make it through. I don't think customers would have been as willing to try new things or interact differently as they do now. So from our standpoint, obviously initially out the gate, there was we didn't want to send our technicians to the home until we understood, what the risk was there. So we kept them outside as a kind of a consultant, and we've moved through technology with things like Help Lightning and things like that. But even our auto auctions, we have auto auctions through Mannheim Auto Auctions. Think about buying a car and never seeing it. That just was not something that, most people, even dealerships that deal with cars, would be willing to do. But yet everything's online, right? And dealerships are now purchasing those vehicles, not sight unseen. They can see it virtually, but they don't get to walk around and touch and feel it. So I think everyone's expectation regarding how do you interact with a product or a service or a company has definitely changed. Ours has done that also. Our real big focus right now is focusing on infrastructure. Trying to keep up with the demand. The demand for the internet basically went up 40% overnight. And with that came all the challenges of, we had to keep increasing speeds. We had to put capacity in the network where it previously wasn't, nor was it previously from a modeling standpoint forecasted. So, think about, typical business communities, districts, we know that they use a lot of bandwidth, right? But then when you shift that all into residential neighborhoods, the whole model, you have to kind of start from scratch and be able to get to it quickly. So, that's really kind of how we've been interacting, is just investing in infrastructure. And then probably the most important aspect of it is this has really exposed that digital divide. So those that are on the other side of the digital divide, whether they're learning or working, they've had the biggest challenges. And so part of what we've been trying to do is figure out, well, how do you bridge that gap for a lot of these folks that are on that side? And so Connect to Compete is something that we've really pressed to get students up. And that has been, that's a lot of volume, and we've been, spending a lot of energy on that. And then even giving computers to folks that haven't had in the past 5 years. We've given about 17,000 computers out to the community, and during the pandemic, the need for that is even more. So one of the big questions that we're trying to figure out with our customers is how can we accelerate what we were doing previously to start having a bigger impact on the digital divide and kind of closing the gap. So a lot going on in that space, but it's doing what we normally do, but doing it with a sense of urgency beyond what we had previously.
Yeah, I bet. And I sent you all a list of predetermined questions, but you bring up something that I really want to touch on, which is each of your businesses has a space within the community. People know your product, or they know you, or they know your staff member or your brewer. It's an actual relationship that existed before COVID. how are you continuing that when we can't really, engage? Do you have a process where you're checking in on your typical clients, or what does that relationship look like now?
So for Cox, we do, especially on the business side, we interact because the business community, there's been a lot of challenges, and we run the range from large businesses down to small businesses. So, we've reached out proactively to small business, or to all our businesses, to see how we can be helpful. We don't know what that looks like all the time, and you really just have to ask your customers, what do you need at this time? And you get some good direction in that space. But it's surprisingly, I know from a technician standpoint, this has been probably a positive. I think customers are more engaged in the technology that they're using, and they've been a lot nicer to our technicians. I think there's a lot of empathy on both sides of the equation right now, both from a customer standpoint and from, if you're providing a business or a service, you have kind of that empathy. We're all going through this together, and that's maybe not something that's been there, but I mean, I think everyone's kind of stopped and paused a little bit to kind of consider, both sides of the equation on that, which I think has been a bright spot to some extent for what's going on.
Colleen or Dennis, you guys want to talk about that? How are you keeping up your relationship?
How are we keeping up our relationship with customers, or
yeah, I mean, or do you have anything that's working particularly well to keep them engaged with you guys? You can't see each other as much. I mean,
yeah, I mean, kind of just the social channels. We do a little live chat for Thorn daily, actually, right now, and we try to stay active on the socials, give sneak peeks and updates via that as much as possible. And then when there's something big, we'll throw it out in the newsletter, like reopening, like we just did this last weekend. So
I'm a big fan of the newsletter. I haven't been doing it for a while because there hasn't been a lot of news I didn't want to tell people when we were opening until I knew for sure. So I'll get doing that again. But in the beginning, we had a really regular wine club group that would come to Wednesday wine tasting all the time. And we just missed them. That was just weird not to be doing that anymore. So we did a Zoom call, and we just invited them all and said, grab your favorite bottle of wine, show us what you're drinking these days, and just very social, not any trying to sell them anything. So, because we have quite a few regular customers, and I'm excited to see them come back. That's going to be a really big thing for us.
Oh, I bet. I think bringing out the extra for everybody, right? So the next question then, with regard to our relationships, how are you keeping up your relationship with your team members? I mean, Colleen, you had to lay folks off, and you're bringing them back. How is that working?
Yeah, when we closed, before we closed, I think we had 4 employees. I was a little bit low on the number of employees, but then that kind of worked out okay because they all had to leave anyway. But they're all coming back. So I just reached out to them and said, we'd love to have you all back. And I'm so happy they're all coming back. I feel like the store wouldn't feel right if I didn't have them in it, if I had a whole new staff. So we'll add a couple people. They're super excited to come back. So that's going to be really good. And it's good for our customers too, because they like to come in and see my husband and I, but they come in to see our staff members also. So.
And I mean, obviously the economy is tough, but there was probably opportunity for those staff members to go elsewhere in this time off. Why do you think you're successful in getting them all to come back to you?
I think part of it is that they knew there was going to be some time off because we knew we were going to be closed for several months. So I think they planned a little bit knowing that was coming. But I think I'm just also getting lucky for sure.
Yeah, it's kind of the name of the game. 2021 and luck.
Yeah, and luck is really, that's a whole other thing. It's like a little bit of luck doesn't hurt during this time.
Most definitely. So Dennis, how are you keeping your team members at it? I mean, so the pandemic was tough for small businesses, and then for those in hospitality, it was just a double whammy. So your guys are probably going through this emotional roller coaster with you. How are you keeping them inspired?
Well, I mean, we're still pretty thin. I mean, if you count part-time and full-time employees spread out over 3 restaurants, 3 tasting rooms, 2 breweries, a distillery, the new 2 restaurants, I mean, you're talking about over 150, maybe over 200 people that aren't working right now. So those people, I still haven't had to figure out if they're coming back or not and what that looks like and to what capacity. What's kind of nice about the distillery restaurant project is that it's employee owned and it's kind of key employees. There's a group of about, I think, almost 10 of us that we all own a piece of this thing, and it's kind of a passion project. And so what's nice is, during this downtime, I mean, this, like the outdoor patio, for instance, we built this whole thing. This wasn't contractors. Like every one of us, you got cooks painting and you got me up screwing in the roof. I mean, it was just this insane, during shutdown. I know we were supposed to be home, but we all pretty much lived together anyways. We pretty much built this whole thing during that time off. So that core group isn't going to go anywhere because their blood, sweat, and tears are in this, and we're just kind of hoping to come out the other end. But the rest of the employees and the businesses, I mean, I think cautiously optimistic about these vaccines and what the world's going to be like after this. But I don't think we're in any degree of normal or growth or success right now. It's just kind of waiting for the world to turn. So yeah, I think a lot of people come back though. What's cool about, I mean, granted, these bars, restaurants, breweries, beer, I mean, everybody likes working here. So even if we don't get the core group back and they've moved on because they found something else or moved, shoot, I know a lot of employees literally moved out of California. So we'll see kind of how we come out of the dust.
Okay, so Dennis O'Connor apparently is such a great boss that he's going to make you also be a construction worker. That actually sounds pretty cool, and I can only imagine how nice it was for folks to be able to be productive. We're all stuck at home. If you told me I could help build a shed, I would probably volunteer to help build a shed right now. But that is kind of fantastic. So, and I think what you and Colleen are both kind of getting at too is that how you treated your employees before COVID matters. How you set those basic fundamental stages and relationships. It's not brain science, right? Or brain surgery. I'm so good at it.
And it's not just how we treat them, it's how they treat each other. So I think they feel like their family as well. So I think that's part of them all coming back together as well.
That makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
So for all of you, if I could get you to kind of think, I appreciate that the pandemic has been brutal, but we're trying to really focus on the good news here. So I'm going to keep it positive, and you'll have to forgive me if it's a little aloof of the question. But how did the pandemic make you a better company? Could you say that it did in some way?
To be determined. I mean, I think I'm just hoping for the Bubba Gump shrimp effect, that competition is thin when we come out of this thing, and we made it through the storm. So I guess that's as positive as I'm getting right now. But I hope it's going to get good.
Okay. Ingo or Colleen?
I mean, I think it helped us reevaluate a lot of things that we were doing. Just things like looking at cost of things, and comparing different things that we were just automatically paying for, and like I changed up my newsletter that I do and in what company I was using it, because I found one that was more useful than the other one, and just taking a look at a lot of my expenses and seeing where maybe I can cut a little bit also. But I kind of agree with Dennis. I'm hoping for a Bubba Gump effect too. Once we get open and we're back out there, I'm hoping for really good things.
Yeah, I think we will be a better company. I know our interactions with our corporate office are a lot closer. I mean, they were close before, but they're even the level of support that we got. Just the idea that they trusted us to go, kind of do what we thought that we had to, and they would then support us on it. I think that was a big change, and we're seeing some of that continue even today. So I think we're working closer. I think from a customer standpoint, I think we have a lot more empathy towards individual customers, their situations. how technology plays in their life and the type of role that we can and should play in that space. So we've heard, when you spend 10 months going into customers' homes and everyone's in a different spot, and we've heard some different stories of this past week. We had 3 technicians who, there was a small kid. His name was King David. It's his name in Escondido, and he was celebrating his birthday, but because it was COVID, he couldn't have a birthday party, so he just had a tent out front, and people would go by hoping that they would honk his horn, and our technicians stopped and got a bunch of technicians to drive by. Are the types of things that I think they're a little bit more aware of what's going around them in their community and how individual customers that we deal with, I think they're more engaged, and I think they're like I said, there's just more empathy. I think when every customer becomes more of an individual based on this. I think this was really hard, and we're still going through it. But I think what made it hard and what we've had to learn to get through it, I think is going to pay dividends down the road in how we treat each other and approach each other. And I'm definitely seeing it from a customer standpoint, from our technicians.
Yeah, that's very sweet. And I think too that, the point you're making about we're all part of this ecosystem of San Diego, just as we're all just trying to make it work, and how we can support one another's well-being goes a long way. But that's very sweet about your technicians. I like that story quite a lot. And you kind of touched on some long-term takeaways. Colleen or Dennis, any other long-term things you'd like to highlight that you're going to implement forever and ever?
I think some of the technology for sure. I mean, this whole, world of Zoom these days, I actually really enjoy it. A lot of people are like, I can't be on another Zoom call, but I like it. I like going to my chamber meetings that way. I don't have to drive anywhere. But for my staff, we were so bad about having employee meetings because I couldn't get everyone together at the same time. This is such an easy way to do it. So I think we'll be able to communicate a little bit better. And I think we'll probably use technology a little bit more than we were before.
Absolutely. I think we lost Dennis. Well, hopefully he can come back on. He looked like he had a lot going on. But I do have one more question for you both, and then we'll go ahead and turn it over to questions that are submitted via the Q&A or the chat. So folks, if you have questions to ask, please jump in. I think what folks who attend this webinar are looking for is real, concrete, sort of like, what do I do, right? Any sort of inspiration goes a long way. So with that in mind, hypothetically, if you had a limited budget and you could only implement 1 or 2 things, what would be the things that you decide you're going to invest your limited resources in to get you through this?
Well, for me, it's going back to that, to the website. So I would say a website and a good email marketing system that works together, because those two together, we can just get so much information out that way that we weren't able to do before. So those are the things, if somebody took them away from me, I would feel like I couldn't survive.
I think for me, if I could invest in anything, it's obviously that technology has played a huge role in everyone's life, even more so than it did previously. So I think investing in tools that would improve the customer experience and allow them to interact with you as they want to, as well as be able to get communications about things that are going on. So that could be waste. It could be, for us, it would be, provisioning systems that allow or make it easier for customers to take technology and get it, hooked up and be able to monitor it without them having to go in and, learn 15 steps on how to change your channel on your router or something like that. Make it easier. The easier for the customer, the better. And I think some of this is driving us in there, but that's where I would invest my money on.
Great. So we did have a question that came through earlier, and I don't know that it would apply to Cox, but if it does, please jump in. I'm going to direct it at Colleen, though. Colleen, did you apply for any of the federal, state, or local grants? And be successful? Okay.
Yes. So early on, we We got one from, I believe, the city of San Diego. And then we've just applied for one I haven't heard back from. But yes, we definitely have been active applying for everything that's out there. All the PPPs, the EIDL, and a couple of grants. Yeah, definitely.
And how are you learning? How do you kind of stay up to speed? Because at the chamber, I can tell you that we're funneling through a ton, but they're coming out all over the place all the time. How are you staying up to snuff on all that?
I think I get some through the chamber, definitely. And early on, we were part of Hillcrest Business Association, so I was getting some through them. And then I think that, yeah, I think that's mostly how I found out about them.
Okay, great. And then we had another one that came through in the chat. So about what kind of events you're thinking about opening, or what kind of events you're thinking of hosting when you do open. Are you already there, or can you even start planning that yet?
I don't think so. I think what we're going to do is do some virtual events now.
Okay.
Take some of the events we were doing in the store, like the whiskey class. We've done a few of them and they've been very, people really like those. So we'll probably try to do some more of those. And I think events we're going to have to stay online for a while.
Absolutely. Okay. I'm going to see if Dennis came back because I had a question submitted to me from him or for him. Ingo, can you talk a little bit more about how you are leveraging the employee feedback? I don't want to say that you obviously didn't do it before, but it sounds like a kind of new way of approaching problems where you're going straight to the technicians and the people on the ground. Is that going to be a long-term thing you'll implement?
Yeah, I mean, we spend a lot of time talking to our employees, so that component's not new. But what I found interesting through this process is, in a lot of cases, especially when it comes to tools, we've defined a problem, and then our corporate office will go out, they'll find a tool, they'll develop it, they'll do trials, they'll push it down, and it'll take 9, 10, 11 months to do that. The difference here was really having employees define use cases, which is a little bit different than what we've done in the past. And I'll give you an example that we didn't even think about. I mean, you talk about the Help Lightning and the virtual augmented reality tool. Well, one of the things that came out of that is, well, hey, maybe you can use it technician to technician. So say, for example, you have a Cox business technician, and there's a lot of products in the business world, right? So when a technician goes out and fixes something, it's almost impossible for them to know all the components that might be out there that they would run into. And so one of the things that was discussed was, well, now when a technician goes on call, if they show up at night and they're not familiar with the equipment, they could do like phone a friend, right? And use the Help Lightning tool to go in there and have another technician that's familiar with that. So those, how do you then make that as part of a process to where that's available? And that was an example of, the employees were thinking, completely different than we were thinking about how do you interact with customers. It became a how do you interact with each other tool to help and improve the efficiency and effectiveness of a technician, and also take some of the fear when they go on call and they're not familiar with the equipment. What do you tell the customer? Well, now you have the ability to do that and they can walk them through. So, that type of feedback, I think we'll continue to get. And, it was a pretty cool process to see us move quickly and fail fast and then move on to something else and then develop the things that worked. That's so quickly. I mean, we do it, but it takes us a long time and a lot of project managers to get through some things. And that was a great experience.
That is very cool. Another question for you both. Part of the back of business effort is highlighting, obviously, the experience of our businesses, but also communicating with policymakers. So what would, if you both had the opportunity to give some feedback to policymakers at, the city or the federal level, what could they be doing to better support you?
I wish things were quicker, as far as getting permits and things like that, because that, like right now, that's where I am. We're planning on opening February 13th. My building will be done and my store will be put together, but will everything be signed off? I don't know. So it always comes down to the last couple of days, biting my nails to see if it's going to happen. And I can't really announce it because if something doesn't, then, you know, then that's not good either. It seems like it happened to us last time too. It's like, okay, I guess we can open tomorrow, instead of really being able to plan for it. So yeah, that's kind of my thing with it, because we're all trying to, we think everybody's trying to be really business friendly, but sometimes it's not quite that easy.
Sometimes process can slow you down, even with the best of intentions.
Yeah.
What about you, Ingo?
Yeah, I've probably interacted more with municipalities and government officials more in the past 10 months than I have in, probably my previous 29 years. And what I think I've learned from this is, at least from a critical infrastructure standpoint, and when I mean that, I mean, phone, cable, power, stuff like that. I think having those relationships up front and talking about what your business model is and what your capabilities are. I found that my interactions with a lot of the city officials now, over a 10-month period, they understand our business a little bit better. They're a little bit more realistic about what can be done. They're a little bit more cognizant of some of the challenges that we have. And I think that understanding probably would move us quicker if we had to do it. But there was a long period of time of 5 to 6 months where we were having conversations, and it was difficult. It was really hard. So I think just having building and maintaining those relationships, I think, is even more critical now, and an understanding on both sides.
Hugely. Yeah, I imagine that you are frequently in conversation with the various municipalities. And how many municipalities is that, just so we can all appreciate?
I wouldn't know off the top of my head, but it's probably north of 20.
That's no small feat. Okay, we are coming up to the tail end. Any final questions? Anything that folks would like to add? Better SEO and take the time to better file. Okay. Absolutely. We're getting a suggestion there about our online presence and SEO. Definitely search engine optimization. Great point. And we could probably do an entire webinar on how to navigate the various tools that the internet brings us, sponsored by Cox. But just another time, another discussion. Thank you. I'll give it one more second for any further questions. And otherwise, we'll go ahead and let everybody have a couple minutes back. I want to thank our panelists. I want to thank our sponsor, Union Bank, for a great conversation, and finally something that doesn't feel like there is no hope, because clearly there is innovation. There are great ideas brewing. And, I think San Diego is going to find that its business community is very supportive of one another, and that we will find our way through this slower than we probably would like, but we'll get there. Okay, folks. Enjoy your and the rest of your day, rather, and happy February.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.